Welcome to Hacking Your ADHD. I'm your host, William Kerb, and I have ADHD. On this podcast, I dig into the tools, tactics, and best practices to help you work with your ADHD brain. And today I'm joined by Skye Waterson for our Research Recap series. In this series, we take a look at a single research paper, and we dive into what the paper says, how it's conducted, and try and find any practical takeaways. In this episode, we're going to be discussing a paper called TikTok and Attention Deficit Hyperactivity Disorder, a cross-sectional study of social media content quality. So this was a paper from 2022 and it got quite a bit of coverage at the time, but it was one I wanted to look at again, not because TikTok's been in the news. I just realized that while I was writing up my notes here that TikTok is having its US ownership changed. That's not what we're going over today. This is just about this 2022 paper. Also, before we get started, I just wanted to mention that I'd love to hear what you guys think of the Research Recap series. So if you have thoughts, head on over to hackingYourADHD.com/contact and let us know what you think. Also, if there's a particular paper or topic that you'd love for us to go over, please let us know. New episodes of Research Recap come out every other Friday. All right, with that, let's get into it. If you've got ADHD, you probably know what it's like to have racing thoughts, intense emotions, and trouble focusing. But did you know those symptoms aren't only signs of ADHD? They can sometimes also be related to OCD. Hyperfocusing on disturbing thoughts, double, triple, quadruple checking your work because your brain won't let you move on, or when the self-criticism, guilt, and shame that can accompany ADHD feels especially overwhelming and persistent. ADHD and OCD can have similar symptoms, and it's common for them to show up together. Both conditions can involve unwanted thoughts, but with OCD, these thoughts tend to feel especially distressing and hard to move on from. OCD can be brutal on its own, but when you're also dealing with ADHD, it can feel even more debilitating. Fortunately, OCD is highly treatable, but it's also not something you should take on yourself. This is where NoCD comes in. NoCD is the world's leading provider of specialized OCD treatment. Their licensed therapists are all trained in ERP, or Exposure and Response Prevention Therapy, the most effective treatment for OCD. NoCD therapists understand how ADHD and OCD can interact, so they'll tailor treatment to work with your brain, not against it. Therapy with NoCD is 100% virtual, and it's covered by insurance for over 155 million Americans. They also provide support between sessions, so you're never alone. If you think you might be struggling with OCD along with ADHD, visit nocd.com to book a free 15-minute call and learn how they can help. That's nocd.com. So, Skye, tell me what you know about TikTok.
Yes, I think this is a good start. So I had TikTok a few years ago, and quite frankly, I didn't love the channels it took me down. It was like, "Ooh, you must want more of this," and I was like, "I don't actually. I value my mental health," and I ended up just turning it off. I ended up not using it. Does that mean I don't use Shorts? No, I go on Instagram Shorts. I go on YouTube Shorts. I just have decided TikTok isn't for me. You won't actually find us on TikTok at all. So this was an interesting conversation because I was kind of coming at this from the perspective of somebody who is active on social media Shorts, but not necessarily TikTok.
Yeah, I had some channels on there, videos I used to upload. I have not actively used TikTok in years, just because it was something that I felt actively detrimental to my health because it has a very good algorithm at capturing attention.
Yeah.
It was just hard for me to both be on there and then being like, I don't think I should use this. Also, let me make videos for other people so they can be on there. And I'm like, and there's some hard to say what's the right answer there, but the right answer for me was just, I'm not going to do this. Even though right now TikTok is on my phone because I wanted to look some of the old videos up, it hasn't really grabbed me again. I haven't had any trouble dealing with the fact that it's there. I just don't open the app because it's not something that is actively in my head to do, which I find is an interesting thing. Because one of the things I wanted to look at before we go into the studies, okay, how much are people watching TikTok? How many videos are they doing? Because I think that's really relevant to the method they use that we'll talk about in a minute. But average TikTok user watches about 95 minutes of TikTok a day, which is an hour and a half. That's a lot, but it's also not that much for some people. So average, there's power users that are watching way more, and then people that are just watching a couple videos a day. But the average video length is between 20 and 30 seconds. Some of them can be as short as 3 seconds, and apparently in some regions you can now have 30-minute long videos. which seems not
That's YouTube. Yeah.
Yeah, it's what YouTube's for. But the bottom line here, I think, is that the average user is going to be seeing hundreds of videos a day, especially if you consider things they're just like scrolling by immediately.
Yeah, definitely. Definitely. And so, in terms of this actual paper, it's a very interesting paper. I feel like we're going to have to start with caveats about various things before we get into it. But essentially, what they wanted to look at is they were looking at, okay, if social media platforms are being used to disseminate mental health information online, they actually said that the hashtag ADHD was the 7th most popular health related hashtag on the platform, which is really crazy in some ways because health is such a big space. They wanted to see if what was going on, what was being posted on TikTok, was something that was going to be considered to be beneficial, correct information about ADHD. Could you go on TikTok and get the information about ADHD that you actually needed according to this paper? We'll get into that as well.
Yeah. And so what they did is they went, okay, we're going to look at this hashtag ADHD. We're going to look at the 100 most popular videos within that hashtag. And then we are going to assess it on two things: this patient educational materials assessment tool for audiovisual materials, PET or PMAT AV. And it is that basically that's just, can you understand the videos? It's really not about the quality. It's more about, or like the, how good the information is really just about, hey, can you understand what the people are saying? Is it important? And in general, they found almost all the videos were very well done that way. And then there was also the Journal of American Medical Association benchmark criteria, the JAMA, and that is the one that a lot of people had issue with in regards to this study. I can pull up my thing on JAMA, but do you have anything to say about it?
Just, it's an interesting one because I think as somebody who started out on the internet posting articles that had a lot of references, I understand that, the importance of doing things. I probably still didn't do it according to JAMA because I didn't know about JAMA. And I think that's something that we're going to get into in a minute. But yeah, tell us about what was their expectations?
Yeah, so the JAMA things are looking at authorship, like who are they crediting this for? Is the attribution clear? Can they find that easily? Like, then, the disclosure of, hey, where are you doing stuff to getting paid to say this, and that kind of stuff. That's incredibly important to have that kind of disclosure, especially with the number of ads that have ADHD information in them. And then the how current the information is. But I think the most important parts here is the slight attribution aspect and who are they attributing this to kind of stuff. That is the big issue that comes up because that's hard to do on social media properly.
Yeah, definitely. And so their expectation was that if you met their criteria, you were essentially coming on, talking about something to do with ADHD that was correct, that was factually correct. You were citing your sources, you were providing references for people to find those sources. And when you looked at the examples that they were using, a large portion of those were also saying, and if you want to fully understand if you have ADHD, you have to go and get diagnosed by a professional. So all of that was being put into a 30-second clip in order for it to meet the criteria.
Which, now, with that said, there are examples of misleading statements. I was like, yeah, that is.
Yes.
The examples of misleading statements. So they had videos describing ADHD paralysis, which that's its own thing. I don't want to go into.
Well, it's a tough
specific...
one because emotional dysregulation in ADHD up until recently was considered something that was not in academic research and therefore you couldn't talk about it. But now it is. And actually one of the reasons people started talking about it was because people talked about the personal experiences of it on TikTok or places like that.
And yeah, but then they also had videos stating that ADHD is equally common between girls and boys, which research doesn't support that, but that
No.
often is because women are underdiagnosed.
Mm-hmm.
So it's hard. Research doesn't say it, but we don't. And then also that ADHD symptoms only intensify with the onset of puberty. I was surprised that was listed as misinformation. Felt that was something that was
Yeah, I have seen that in studies. I think the one that, because we're not doing a very good job of examples here, I think the one that really stood out to me as an example was somebody had a video that was like, if you listen to this, it will tell you if you have ADHD. It was like an audio, like that kind of stuff, that just kind of off the wall wild stuff where it's like
or
nothing
this
to back that up.
this one I saw, the ADHD lacks object permanence, which is that's again where the attribution is wrong here, where people are like, I'm calling this object permanence. That's not what that's called. That's something babies deal with. Also, apparently that's really bad research as well when I looked into it, but that's not the point of this video. But yeah, with the out of sight, out of mind is not object permanence, that we forget. Some object permanence is more about the idea that once something leaves your field of view, that you don't even know it exists anymore. Not that you don't know where it is and you're not thinking about it. Because I could be like you asked me to put some scissors in a drawer, and then I put the scissors in a drawer. At that point, I don't know scissors exist anymore. But if you asked me, hey, where'd you put the things? I'd be like, in the drawer. So it's a different aspect.
Yeah, it's very different. Yeah. And so there was some things that were, very much misleading if you'd been on TikTok and you had said, and some people do, this is going to be my sole source of information about ADHD and symptoms and all that kind of stuff, then that could be quite misleading, and it could potentially lead you down a path of thinking you have it when you don't have it, or thinking you don't have it when you do have it, because you're like, well, I don't have object permanence, or I do, or something like that.
And so they classified the videos in 3 different ways. They were or actually, I should say how they just went about it. They had 2 people watch the videos and classify them as either misleading, personal experience, or as useful. And if the people disagreed, they had a third person come in and decide on which one it was.
Yeah. And so they had really good criteria. Like, one of the cool things about this paper was they had a criteria, they were using it. It was more about to what end, because they did a few things that were quite interesting. So one was, if a personal experience video contained any generalized misleading statements, it was classified as misleading rather than personal experience, which becomes relevant when you find out personal experience is one of the most popular. Like, it was the most useful, which makes sense. That's what a lot of us are interested in. And then in terms of their examples of useful videos, it was really interesting because they had, videos describing auditory processing disorder could be comorbid with ADHD, but a medical or audiological assessment is required for this to be diagnosed, or videos saying that ADHD symptoms of daydreaming, sleep disturbances, and school difficulties could all be symptoms of ADHD. Again, recommendation to see a mental health professional if the viewer is wondering about ADHD. And this is the kind of language use that you would really only find with healthcare professionals. You're not going to necessarily see that a lot in people who are, say, doing a POV of the day in their life experiencing ADHD symptoms.
Yeah. And that did seem to be one of the things that they were really looking for. They wanted to use this as a launch pad to get more healthcare professionals making these kind of videos TikToks. So that we could have. And I've seen some, and I don't know, there are some people that are really good at doing it, and there are some people that you're like, this is okay information, but man, you are not doing this for an ADHD audience.
Yeah, definitely. And although when you looked at the difference between the healthcare professionals and the non-healthcare professionals, it wasn't a significant difference in terms of views and likes and shares. One of the great things about having the real data is when you look at the real data, you do see, okay, well, the mean likes were 6,500 and then the other one was like 402,000. So it's like Sorry, I said that wrong. 653,000 for non-healthcare professionals in terms of mean likes versus 402,000 for healthcare professionals in terms of mean likes. So there was a stark difference, and you saw that across the views, across the shares. People just didn't resonate much with healthcare professional information, which makes sense because the way it was being described was very clinical and not necessarily something that was going to be scroll stopping, if you want to talk about that idea.
Yeah. So I do think that's one of the big issues is presentation matters a lot in this kind of thing. And I'll admit, in the last few years, I have seen more healthcare professionals that are switching from primarily being healthcare to going more to the influencer model because they think they can help more people that way.
Mm-hmm.
And some of them are very good. Some of them are not good. In fact, like even here, like they had, so
some of them were misleading.
Yeah, they had 20% of the healthcare professional videos were misleading. Admittedly, that is a very small. So we have 100 videos, and then only I think 11 of them were
11. Yeah, so numerically we're talking.
Yeah, and then 3 of them were misleading. So that makes it like, oh my god, it's 27%.
It's just 3 people who forgot to cite their source. But I think the conversation of citing your sources is an interesting one because, look, I'll be totally real. We do this, right? We come on, and we do this podcast. Part of the reason is because we're very passionate about helping people find the real research and as much as possible sharing that information with as much knowledge as possible. I don't claim to be an expert on everything. But when it comes to posting that on social media, I have had a bit of a conflict of interest around, do I cite the source? Do I say this is, I always say this is based on research, but do I then put the source in the link or not? Because, do people need that, or can they go to the podcast for that information? This is kind of making me want to put my sources back in and be like, hey, I'll take the hit in terms of interest.
Yeah, because I don't want to land on the wrong side of things. But yeah, at the same time, I'm going, because I guess to go at what their findings were, they found that 52% of videos were misleading, 27% were personal experience, and then only 21% were seen as useful ADHD information. I did not, when I looked at those numbers, I was like, man, I don't know if I feel great about the fact that we're separating useful and personal experience here.
Yeah, I think honestly that was maybe the biggest thing for me, because a lot of what we talk about is our personal experience, the personal experience of, in my case, I work with clients, so clients' experiences. And it's an interesting one because, there's lots of things like some people struggle to get diagnosis. You can't just say, if you want to know this, you should get diagnosed. It's like thousands of dollars and it doesn't even happen in my country for the next 9 months, These things can be problematic. And then when you're talking about what makes it useful, personal experiences, that's where the conversation about rejection sensitivity comes in. And some of that still isn't in the research, but in some ways the research needs to catch up with what people are saying. So it's a bit of a chicken and egg there as well.
Yeah. And I don't want people to come away from this podcast with them thinking that we're saying there's no misinformation about
this is
ADHD
a research
social media
episode series. We are literally looking at academic research. We clearly like this stuff.
Yeah. And because there is tons of misinformation about ADHD in there, especially from popular creators who maybe don't understand the nuance of what's going on. And that's often what a lot of misinformation comes from, is that lack of nuance, where they're like, oh, ADHD is just a dopamine deficit idea, or ADHD is just being over or understimulated. And that might have aspects of it, but you can't. Nuance is such an important part of the conversation.
Yeah. And I think maybe if you were to take away a practical thing from this, it would be that everybody on social media might be misleading you, because even the people who were doing it in an academic context, like, hello, I'm a doctor, this is what I'm saying, this is the references, they still had some misleading information. So I think it's worth doing your own research, maybe using these spaces like TikTok as a jumping off point to go, oh, that's really interesting, I wonder if that's true, rather than going, I just heard that and therefore that is true.
Yeah, especially I've seen stuff from someone's like, oh, they got a PhD, and I'm looking at their stuff and I'm like, oh, they have a PhD in education or something, and they're just using that as a way to build their credibility. And not saying that PhD in education is bad, it's just that if you're looking at something psychological, you probably want that kind of degree. Not that. And then I also have to acknowledge that, I don't have any of those fancy numbers or letters behind my name. So it's I think the citing the sources is really important, because we want to know where people are getting their information so that people can check for themselves. Because I know I'm going to get things wrong, and I don't want that to make people think, oh, he's doing everything wrong. This is why. I'm trying to do my best. And that's what I really hope for most people online.
Yeah, I think that's probably the takeaway. If you are posting things online, try and cite your sources. I have seen some very prominent magazines and journals in ADHD space that do not cite their sources, and I have to say, sometimes you go, well, why? Like, I have this and this is known, and to somebody maybe in the academic space, this is so well known it feels silly to kind of cite the source again. But maybe that's the thing we can all take away from this, is like, hey, go back to citing your sources. You can put it in the comments. It's not going to kill your reach. But in terms of, and then in terms of people who are viewing it, it's going, okay, this is a jumping off point for knowledge. It's not the source of knowledge. Hello! So you were just listening to a research recap. I'm Skye Waterson of Unconventional Organization. If you like that, there's lots more information about ADHD and support for you at unconventionalorganization.com. You can go ahead and check that out. Lots of free resources, lots of strategies, and if you want to join our programs, you can do that as well. And we'll see you there, Unconventional Organization.